Greece was supposed to be a success story by now. 15 years have passed since the debt crisis exploded. Bailouts ended. Markets reopened. Growth returned. Headlines now say Greece is back. Some even call it a recovery miracle. But behind those headlines, the reality is far less impressive. Greece's economy is growing, yet Greek living standards are still far behind where they once were. In 2023, real gross domestic product per person stood at about €19,460. That is only about 59% of the Eurozone average. It is also still about 13% lower than Greece level before the crisis in 2007. That gap tells a deeper story. Greece did not bounce back. It stabilized at a lower level. The country is no longer collapsing, but it is also no longer catching up. Growth exists, but convergence does not. This is the central puzzle. How can Greece grow faster than much of Europe and still feel stuck? The answer is not laziness. It is not corruption alone. It is not bad luck. The real reason sits at the center of Europe's monetary system. Greece never fully recovered because it lost the tools needed to recover, and the system it joined does not allow escape. To understand that trap, the story must go back to what changed when Greece joined the euro. Before the euro, Greece had a powerful adjustment tool: its own currency. When the economy struggled, Greece could devalue its currency. That made exports cheaper, tourism stronger, and wages more competitive. It was not painless, but it worked. When Greece joined the euro, that tool disappeared. In return, Greece gained cheap credit. Interest rates fell. Money flowed in. Borrowing became easy. For years, the economy expanded on borrowed confidence. Debt grew faster than productivity. When the global financial crisis arrived, that model collapsed. Greece could not devalue. It could not print money. It could not control interest rates. Adjustment had to happen through internal cuts. Wages fell. Spending collapsed. Unemployment exploded. Between 2010 and 2018, Greece's economy shrank by about 25%. Millions left the country, especially young workers. Austerity restored basic solvency, but it destroyed growth capacity. Productivity stagnated. Investment dried up. When the crisis officially ended, Greece was left inside a currency union that removed flexibility but demanded discipline. That is the euro trap. Stability without sovereignty. Greece survived the crash, but the structure it remained in made full recovery mathematically difficult. And that structure still defines Greece's economy today. Supporters of the euro often point to recent growth numbers as proof that Greece is finally recovering. In 2025, that looks convincing at first glance. In the third quarter, Greece's economy grew about 0.6% compared to the previous quarter. Year-on-year growth reached about 2.0%, stronger than the Eurozone average. Full-year growth is projected between 2.2 to 2.5%, again above most peers. But growth alone does not equal recovery. What matters is where that growth comes from and what it changes. Much of Greece's recent growth is driven by consumption, tourism, and European recovery funds. Tourism alone accounts for around 20% of gross domestic product. That makes growth vulnerable to global shocks. Productivity growth remains weak, with long-term potential estimated near 1.25%. That is too low for meaningful convergence with richer countries. Investment remains constrained by bureaucracy, weak exports, and limited credit. Even after years of growth, Greece's unemployment still sits around 8.2%, higher than the Eurozone average. These numbers show stabilization, not transformation. Greece is growing, but it is growing inside a narrow corridor. The euro allows survival, but it limits escape. And the deeper constraint is still waiting ahead. The biggest weight holding Greece back is debt. One reason Greece's recovery feels incomplete is that the economy never rebuilt its productive core. Before the crisis, growth was driven by construction, consumption, and cheap credit. After the crash, those sectors collapsed, but nothing equally strong replaced them. Manufacturing remains small. High-value exports are limited. Many skilled workers left the country during the crisis years and never returned. This brain drain reduced innovation and entrepreneurship at exactly the wrong time. Even today, many young Greeks work in tourism or low-productivity services because better opportunities do not exist. Tourism brings cash, but it does not raise productivity across the whole economy. It is seasonal, vulnerable to shocks, and concentrated in a few regions. That limits long-term income growth. Meanwhile, Bureaucracy remains heavy. Starting a business is slow. Courts move slowly. Investment decisions get delayed. These problems are well known, but fixing them requires time and money. That is where the euro trap tightens. Greece cannot invest aggressively because debt rules demand restraint. Growth becomes dependent on consumption and visitors instead of production and exports. That is why recent growth has not translated into higher living standards. The economy moves forward, but only a little. And without a stronger productive base, each shock threatens to push Greece back again. Eurozone membership also shapes how investors see Greece. Even after bailouts ended, Greece remained under close fiscal supervision. That oversight reassured lenders but discouraged risk-taking. Investors know Greece must prioritize budget surpluses over growth. That limits public support for large-scale projects. Interest rates may be lower than during the crisis, but borrowing is still constrained by rules and expectations. Greece cannot use monetary policy to support domestic investment. It relies on European central bank decisions made for much larger economies. Those decisions often fit Germany or France better than Greece. This creates a mismatch. When Greece needs stimulus, the Eurozone may tighten. When Greece needs protection, markets may still demand caution. As a result, private investment remains cautious. Many projects depend on European recovery funds, which boost growth temporarily but expire after a few years. These funds help stabilize the economy but do not remove the underlying constraints. Once they fade, growth slows again. This creates a pattern of short-term improvement followed by stagnation. Greece is not failing because investors distrust it completely. It is stuck because the system rewards caution over transformation. Stability becomes the ceiling, not the foundation. Another hidden cost of the euro trap is demographic pressure. During the crisis, millions of Greeks left the country to find work elsewhere in Europe and beyond. Many were young and skilled. That loss still affects the economy today. A smaller workforce limits growth potential. An aging population raises pension and healthcare costs. These pressures make fiscal discipline even harder. Greece must generate surpluses while supporting more retirees and fewer workers. That math is unforgiving. Even with growth above the Eurozone average, per-person income remains low. At around €19,460 per person, Greece's living standard sits far below richer members of the currency union. That gap fuels frustration and emigration, reinforcing the cycle. Countries outside the euro might devalue to adjust wages and attract investment. Greece cannot. Adjustment happens through slow wage restraint and limited job creation. That protects competitiveness but suppresses income growth. The economy becomes stable but fragile. Any external shock, from tourism decline to global slowdown, hits harder. Greece survives each test, but it never accelerates. The euro trap does not crush the economy. It prevents escape velocity. The most confusing part of Greece's story is that many indicators look better than before. Banks are healthier. Budgets are balanced. Growth exists. Unemployment is lower than during the crisis. These improvements are real. But recovery is not about surviving. It is about catching up. Greece has not done that. Even after years of growth, it remains far below the Eurozone average in income and productivity. The structure of the Eurozone explains why. Without its own currency, Greece cannot use exchange rates to adjust. Without control over interest rates, it cannot target domestic needs. High debt forces permanent caution. European oversight limits experimentation. These constraints combine into a system that rewards stability and punishes bold change. Greece is allowed to exist comfortably below its potential. That is the euro trap. It is not a conspiracy. It is arithmetic and rules. Growth can occur, but convergence is blocked. That is why Greece feels like it never fully recovered. The crisis ended, but the limitation remained. And until that limitation changes, growth will continue without resolution. The hardest part is that nothing appears broken enough to force reform. Many people ask why Greece cannot simply grow faster and solve these problems over time. The answer lies in growth quality, not growth speed. Greece's recent expansion relies heavily on consumption, tourism, and temporary external funding. These sources raise output, but do not transform the economy. Productivity remains weak, with long-term potential growth estimated around 1.25%. That ceiling matters. At that pace, Greece cannot close the income gap with richer Eurozone countries. Even growing faster than average for a few years does not reverse decades of divergence. The structure of the Eurozone encourages this outcome. Countries with strong industrial bases benefit more from a shared currency. Countries like Greece, with weaker export capacity, struggle to gain competitiveness without currency adjustment. This means growth happens inside limits. Greece can improve at the margin, but it cannot leap forward. Over time, frustration builds. Citizens feel that effort does not lead to progress. That weakens trust and investment appetite. Growth becomes something to manage rather than pursue aggressively. The Euro trap does not prevent Greece from moving. It prevents Greece from accelerating. And without acceleration, recovery never feels complete, no matter how many years pass. European recovery funds play an important role in Greece's recent performance. These funds support infrastructure, digital upgrades, and green projects. Estimates suggest they could boost Greece's gross domestic product by around 4.5% through 2026. That is significant, but temporary support does not equal structural change. Recovery funds are time-limited. They arrive with conditions. Once they end, the underlying constraints remain. Greece cannot rely on continuous transfers to sustain growth forever. Markets understand this. Investors price projects cautiously, knowing public support has an expiration date. This reduces long-term commitment. Instead of building independent growth engines, the economy adjusts to funding cycles. When funds flow, activity rises. When they slow, growth fades. This pattern creates dependency rather than resilience. Meanwhile, debt obligations remain permanent. Greece must continue servicing debt regardless of funding cycles. That asymmetry limits risk-taking. Recovery funds stabilize the present but do not unlock the future. They make the Euro trap more comfortable, not weaker. And comfort can delay hard reforms rather than accelerate them. Greece appears to move forward, but only while external support remains strong. Another reason Greece never fully recovered is divergence inside the Eurozone itself. Countries like Germany and France entered the currency union with strong industrial bases, high productivity, and export capacity. Greece entered with a service-heavy economy and weaker institutions. The euro removed exchange rate differences, but did not remove structural differences. Over time, those gaps widened. Germany's competitiveness increased. Greece struggled to adjust. Without currency flexibility, adjustment required internal deflation, wage restraint, and austerity. That process reduced demand and slowed recovery. Even today, Greece's gross domestic product per person remains far below that of Northern Europe. This divergence creates a permanent imbalance. The Eurozone treats members as equals in monetary policy, but unequal in economic capacity. That mismatch benefits stronger economies and constrains weaker ones. Greece's recovery is judged against stability benchmarks rather than convergence goals. As long as budgets balance and debt remains serviceable, the system is satisfied. But living standards remain secondary. Greece is no longer a crisis risk, but it is also not a growth priority. That is the quiet cost of membership. Safety replaces ambition. Over time, this structure shapes behavior. Greek policymakers learn to avoid risk. Citizens adjust expectations downward. Businesses plan conservatively. The economy settles into a low-growth equilibrium. That equilibrium feels safe but limiting. Even when growth exceeds Eurozone averages, it does not feel transformative. Wages rise slowly. Opportunities remain limited. Young people continue to leave. This creates a psychological dimension to the Euro trap. Recovery becomes a technical concept rather than a lived experience. Statistics improve, but daily life does not change enough. That gap breeds cynicism. Greece is no longer in emergency mode, but it is not moving forward with confidence. The Eurozone structure rewards patience and discipline, but it does not reward rebuilding lost potential. Greece followed the rules, paid the price, and stabilized. Yet the reward is partial recovery at best. That outcome sends a message. Survival is guaranteed. Progress is optional. And optional progress rarely happens under strict constraints. The economy learns to endure rather than advance. That is why Greece's story still feels unfinished, even after 15 years. Many people assume Greece could fix its problems by leaving the euro. In theory, regaining a national currency would restore control over monetary policy and allow devaluation. In practice, exit would be extremely costly. Contracts, savings, and debts are all denominated in euro. A sudden exit would likely trigger capital flight, bank stress, and sharp inflation. That risk keeps Greece inside the system, even if the system limits recovery. This is another layer of the euro trap. Leaving is painful. Staying is restrictive. Policymakers are forced to choose the least damaging option rather than the best one. Over time, this choice becomes permanent. Greece adapts to constraint instead of challenging it. Structural reforms continue, but slowly. Productivity improves, but marginally. Debt declines, but remains heavy. The economy becomes stable, but constrained. This middle state is difficult to escape. Crisis no longer forces change. Comfort prevents urgency. Greece is not trapped by a single decision. It is trapped by accumulated costs on all sides. Each path forward carries risk, so the country remains where it is. That is how economic systems lock in outcomes without dramatic failure. What makes Greece's case important is not that it failed, but that it complied. Greece accepted austerity, reformed labor markets, restructured banks, and restored fiscal balance. These steps stopped the collapse. They did not restore lost potential. This shows a deeper truth about the Eurozone design. Adjustment is asymmetric. Weak countries adjust more than strong ones. Strong countries keep advantages built into the system. Over time, this produces divergence. Greece's effort prevented disaster, but did not generate convergence. Living standards remain far below the Eurozone average. Debt still dictates policy. Growth remains capped. This outcome was not accidental. It follows directly from rules that prioritize stability over development. The Eurozone succeeded in preventing collapse. It did not succeed in rebuilding Greece's economy. That distinction matters. Stability feels like success to institutions. For citizens, it feels like stagnation. Greece did everything asked of it and received partial recovery in return. That experience reshaped public expectations. Recovery became defined as survival, not progress. And once expectations fall, pressure for change fades. Greece's story carries a warning beyond its borders. It shows how monetary unions can freeze inequality between members. Countries that start weaker remain weaker. Countries that start stronger consolidate advantages. Without transfer mechanisms large enough to close gaps, convergence slows or stops. Growth alone does not fix this. Greece grows, yet remains far behind. Debt, demographics, and productivity limits reinforce each other. Tourism softens the pain but does not solve the problem. Recovery funds help temporarily but expire. Over time, the economy learns to operate within narrow limits. This is not unique to Greece. It is a pattern visible across parts of Southern Europe. The lesson is uncomfortable. Economic systems can work exactly as designed and still deliver unsatisfying outcomes. Greece never fully recovered because recovery was defined narrowly. The goal was stability, not restoration. That goal was achieved. Everything beyond it was optional. Optional progress rarely survives political and institutional constraints. Greece's story is not about failure. It is about ceilings. And ceilings are harder to fight than collapses because they do not feel urgent. Today, Greece is often described as normal again. Markets function. Growth continues. Crisis headlines are gone. But normal does not mean healed. Greece remains poorer than before the crisis. Its people remain less productive than peers. Its policy space remains limited. The euro trap is not visible in daily life, but it shapes every major decision. The country cannot shock its way forward. It can only inch ahead. That is why recovery feels incomplete even after 15 years. Greece did not fall back. It never fully caught up. The euro provided safety but removed flexibility. Debt enforced discipline but limited investment. Growth returned but lacked power. These forces combined into a stable but constrained outcome. Greece's story challenges a common belief that time alone fixes economic damage. Time only works when systems allow adjustment. In Greece's case, adjustment tools were removed. What remains is patience, endurance, and gradual change. That may be enough to survive. It is not enough to restore what was lost. And that is why the recovery never felt real. Greece did not fail to recover because it refused to change. It failed to recover because the system it lived inside defined what recovery was allowed to mean. Stability replaced progress. Survival replaced ambition. The euro trap did not destroy Greece. It limited its future quietly. This story matters because it shows how powerful systems can lock countries into permanent halfway states. Not collapsing, not thriving, just enduring. And endurance is not the same as recovery. Greece is not unique. It is just earlier in the process. If you want to see how similar traps are forming in other countries right now, subscribe. These videos are about the costs that only appear years later, when choices are already locked in. And before you go, answer a simple question. If this can happen inside Europe, where do you think the next version is forming?